Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our university hour today. My name is Daniel Donahue. I teach in the English department here. I want to just begin with some thank yous. I want to thank the University Hour Committee for funding this event, along with the Eastern Visiting Writers Series, and involved in the English department, and also the Dean of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Carmen Cid, for sponsoring this event, and also the Vet Center, who has helped out and who are here today. As you saw on the way in, Dr. Weigel has books for sale if you would like to get one, or if you already have one. After the reading, I'm sure he would be happy to sign it for you, so please take advantage of that. And also, following the reading, there will be a brief question and answer. I know if you have a 4 o'clock, you're right up against that, so we're going to be cognizant of that. But after the brief Q&A, after his reading, there will be, starting at 4 o'clock, another Q&A, focusing on our student writers and our veterans. It'll just be smaller, and we can all kind of get together, and Dr. Weigel has graciously agreed to hang out with us and talk about whatever it is that you would like to talk about with writing and his experiences. So a little bit about him, and then we'll hear his work. Soon after turning 18, Bruce Weigel enlisted in the Army after being born and raised in Lorain, Ohio, and served in Vietnam for 1 year, beginning in December of 1967. He was awarded the Bronze Star and returned home to his hometown of Lorain, where he enrolled in Lorain County Community College. As Weigel states in his best-selling prose memoir, The Circle of Hang, which is for sale in the lobby, "The paradox of my life as a writer is that the war ruined my life and in return gave me my voice." He earned his BA from Oberlin, his MA from the University of New Hampshire, and his PhD from the University of Utah. He's taught at several universities, the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, Old Dominion University, and Penn State University. Has served as president of the Associated Writing Programs and as chair of the judging panel for the National Book Award in Poetry. After teaching at Penn State, he returned to Lorain County Community College as distinguished professor, the school's first distinguished professor. In addition to teaching, he worked with Veterans Group and started with his students an online journal called the North Coast Review. He recently retired from Lorain County Community College as his position, not just as distinguished professor, but by the time he had left, he had founded and developed the Veteran Services Center, which got up and running and has been passed on to someone after him. Influenced by James Wright, Weigel's poetry seeks, in his words, the beauty of a thing said straight. His early work engages with the horror of his experience in war, while more recent work examines themes of family and childhood. His Buddhist practices influence his compassionate and unflinching attention to what he terms ordinary people in extraordinary situations. He's the author of 16 books of poetry, including the forthcoming On the Shores of Welcome Home, The Abundance of Nothing, which is available in the lobby, which was one of two finalists for the Pulitzer Prize in it came out 2012, so it would have been probably 2013. He also the author of The Unraveling Strangest, The Archaeology of the Circle, new and selected poems, kind of a sampling, like a poetry greatest hits, if you will. That's available in the lobby. And that was also, and also Song of Napalm, a collection of poems about his war experiences, which was also nominated for Pulitzer. He has written several collections of critical essays, has published several collections of poetry and translation, and has edited or co-edited numerous anthologies, including Writing Between the Lines, an anthology of war and social consequences, Mountain River, Vietnamese poetry from the wars, 1948 to 1993. Weigel's own poetry has been widely anthologized as well in a long list of anthologies, including Best American Poetry, the anthology Against Forgetting 20th Century Poetry of Witness. He has won numerous awards, including a prestigious Lannan Foundation Award, awards for the Patterson Poetry Prize, the Poets Prize from the Academy of American Poets, the Cleveland Arts Prize, 2 Pushcart Prizes, fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, and also the Yaddo Foundation. And I want to thank Bruce on behalf of my students from earlier, all of the students who were there, led just a wonderful, nurturing, positive writing workshop. And we're all very excited, Bruce, to hear you share your poems now. So please join me in welcoming Bruce Weigel.
That made me tired just listening. That sounds like so much. Thank you all for coming. If your teacher told you had to come, you can leave now. I'll wait a few minutes. We did have a great class, and I was very impressed with the level of work that I saw in the undergraduate workshop. It was very impressive. Good things are happening in creative writing here, in case you didn't know that. I once asked my grandmother, my Yugoslav grandmother, if there was something there. I said there had to be something good about getting old, and she stroked her beard, and she said, "No, nothing." That kind of bothered me because I thought maybe there would be some reward, at least, for all the suffering that you have to go through as you get older. And then Phil Levine, a wonderful American poet, came to my college at Oberlin when I was an undergraduate, and he said something that I'm sure went right through everybody's head, but it really stuck in mind. He said, "I'm going to read a poem that I wrote 25 years ago." And I thought, oh my God, he's been doing this for 25 years. Jesus, how can you do that? How can you? I was so ignorant of a writer's life, and so moved by the fact that he told me that. So I thought there is some good things about getting older. So I want to start with a poem that I wrote 25 years ago called Song of Napalm, for my wife. After the storm, after the rain stopped pounding, we stood in the doorway watching horses walk off lazily across the pasture's hill. We stared through the black screen, our vision altered by the distance, so I thought I saw a mist kicked up around their hooves when they faded like cutout horses away from us. The grass was never more blue in that light, more scarlet. Beyond the pasture, trees scraped their voices into the wind. Branches crisscrossed the sky like barbed wire. But you said they were only branches. Okay, the storm stopped pounding. I'm trying to say this straight. For once, I was sane enough to pause and breathe outside my wild plans. And after the hard rain, I turned my back on the old curses. I believed they swung finally away from me. But still the branches are wire and thunder is the pounding mortar. Still I close my eyes and see the girl running from her village, napalm stuck to her dress like jelly, her hands reaching for the no one who waits in waves of heat before her. So I can keep on living, so I can stay here beside you. I try to imagine she runs down the road and wings beat inside until she rises above the stinking jungle and her pain eases in your pain and mine. But the lie swings back again. The lie works only as long as it takes to speak, and the girl runs only as far as the napalm allows until her burning tendons and crackling muscles draw her up into that final position burning bodies so perfectly assume. Nothing can change that. She is burned behind my eyes, and not your good love, and not the rain-swept air, and not the jungle green pasture unfolding before us can deny it. So I wrote that poem during a period of time when I was trying to write about my experiences in the American War in Vietnam. And I had some models, but mostly they were from World War I. And there wasn't a lot of encouragement when we first began doing this, first began writing these poems. Those of us who had fought. In fact, some of us were discouraged. And I remember being told as an undergraduate, and I went to a really fine school, being told as an undergraduate that no one, quote unquote, no one wants to read about this anymore. and the subject was the American War in Vietnam. So, there I was still a kid, 20 years old, and I'd been in this war, and all this stuff had happened, and I felt this real tug to write about it, but nobody wants to hear about it, and no one wants to help me find my way through this. So it was a good thing that happened, because it forced me to write poems about other things than the war. But for a period of about 10 years, that's what I was obsessed with, is trying to find a way to put into poetry the experiences that I had in the war as a boy. That was my goal, my impossible goal. I'm going to read one more poem from that same book called The Snowy Egret. Just because we talked so much about it, and I remembered it. My neighbor's boy has lifted his father's shotgun and stolen down to the backwaters of the Elizabeth, and in the moon he's blasted a snowy egret from the shallows it stalked for small fish. Midnight, my wife wakes me. He's in the backyard with a shovel, so I go down half drunk with pills that let me sleep to see what I can see and if it's safe. The boy doesn't hear me come across the dewy grass. He says through tears he has to bury it. He says his father will kill him, and he digs until the hole is deep enough and gathers the egret carefully into his arms, as if not to harm the blood-splattered wings gleaming in the flashlight beam. His man's muscled shoulders shake with the weight of what he can't set right, no matter what. But one last time he tries to stay a child, sobbing, "Please don't tell." He says he only meant to flush it from the shadows. He only meant to watch it fly, but the shot spread too far, ripping into the white wing, span awkwardly for a moment until it glided into brackish death. I want to grab his shoulders, shake the lies loose from his lips, but he hurts enough. He burns with shame for what he's done, with fear for his hard father's fists I've seen crash down on him for so much less. I don't know what to do but hold him. If I let go, he'll fly to pieces before me. What a time we share that can make a good boy steal away, wiping out from the blue face of the pond what he hadn't even known he loved, blasting such beauty into nothing. So you might say, oh, that's not a poem about Vietnam. And when I wrote it, I really didn't think about it as a poem about the war. And I sent it to an editor friend of mine, and he called me and said, "I really like those poems you sent, especially the Vietnam poem." And I said, "I didn't send you a Vietnam poem." He said, "Yes, you did." I said, "Which poem is it?" He said, "It's Snowy Egret." And I thought, oh my God, he's right. It's a Vietnam poem. It is. So I think I don't have to explain the allegory, right? It's pretty apparent, right? Who was who in the poem and everything. And that's a poem, I'll say this to the career writing students, don't fail to take advantage of your dreams as writers. Because we get wonderful triggers for poems from our dreams, because it's a different kind of consciousness. So that poem began with a dream about a boy burying a bird in my backyard. That was all I remember of the dream, but I told my wife the dream, and then when I got to work that day, I was still thinking about it, so I just wrote that part down. And then a couple days later, I started thinking, okay, what does this mean? How can I put a narrative around this image? And the poem that I just read came. So, how are we doing? Good. I'm going to read a few poems from a book that's coming out this year called On the Shores of Welcome Home. And I can tell you a little bit about the title. I haven't thought about it too much, but so I'm 70 years old. And when you're 70 years old, you're like getting close to the front of the line, you know. And you begin to think about that. Just like when you begin to think about when you're a teenager, how you begin to think, I can't wait until I'm 16 or 18. Things change, your life changes, your friends change, your world changes. And there are different things to pay attention to as a writer. So this book, On the Shores of Welcome Home, is really a book about that. It's about that last part of our life, my life. Even if I live to be 100, that's still only 30 years. So, and I'm not going to make 100. So that's what this book is about, and I'll read a few poems from this. This is called A Late Corrupted Flash. And for those prosody students out there, this is written in quatrains of iambic pentameter rhymed A-B-A-B, with some variation. I couldn't think of anything to do. I was out among the traffic in the street, but didn't make my way. My view was blocked and nothing left but new defeats. And then I stepped into a line of trees I know I'd seen before, the sulfur smell, the bullets whizzing past like wild bees. I wasn't where I thought I was. I fell again through something damp like air, then back inside the traffic jam I knew was caused by me. My drifting as I do, my lack of self-control to know just when to pause before I cross into that other place that somehow always stays inside my soul. And I wish that I could say a simple grace would be enough to make me whole. I was lost inside the river, so I didn't move and thought I'd wait it out. That night in all its splendor, the lies that let me stand there as if without a doubt. In the morning, someone came or no one came at all. I knew somehow I'd wake and be alive, but never be the same again. A fall from grace so hard and fast, I can't abide. That night I died, and it was not like dreaming. Although my heart kept beating, my brain a whir. The world outside my mind stopped meaning anything at all. So you can't see me through the blur of monumental metaphors the doctors rig like precious metal crosses that hang a name across my latest jig, and never mind the other losses. So, I just, once again, I know that I'm speaking to writers here today, so I just wanted to share with you the idea of the moment that I'm writing about in the poem is a terrible thing that happens. It's about a soldier who gets left behind and has to spend the night in this place by himself. And coincidentally, he's standing chest deep in the river. So that's the event that's being remembered. And it partially comes from my experience, but it's very chaotic when I try to think about that event. It's all over the place. So that's why I put the poem in the metrical form that it was in. I thought that the metrical form could help contain that craziness that war is, that wildness. So you might want to try that sometime. Not the war part, the other part. Okay, let's try that one. If you knew me, you'd know that I'm actually a really funny guy. For some reason, it doesn't get in the poems. I don't have any funny poems. I had some poems I thought were funny, but no one ever laughed. So this is not funny. It's called The Long-Term Consequences of the Convoy Leading to Pegasus in the Fallen World. Or, when I packed myself up for the loony bin, I didn't know it was the loony bin at the time was my lousy problem, and I blame myself for that, and I ended up in a field I know is littered with mines because I've seen it before beside a river named Kalu. If my brain allows me just one memory, just one sane moment like the one the photon-bright flashes the doctors held inches from my face brought back, a radiant time that no one in the room could know but me. Like the field of mines I had stood next to on the LZ and walked around more than once and watched a parachute of something drift off target and land there almost softly. The lights the doctors flashed in my eyes and the saline they pumped into my veins in the 30 hours without sleep brought the morning right back into the room, and that morning became the day of the longest night of the 7, dead in a single bunker. Night of small arms fire along the river, movement in the high grass, voices, radio noise, sometimes even their music at night. sometimes even their music, night of the separation of my body from my soul, such a violent tearing I couldn't even feel. They're cheery, aren't they? I'm going to end with some prose poems from a new manuscript that I just finished. And I haven't read these poems to very many people, so please bear with me. If you really hate them, I appreciate it if you let me know afterwards. So what is a prose poem? Who can tell me what a prose poem is? It doesn't make sense, does it? It's like saying a wet dry or a cold warm, a prose poem. It's two different things. So how do we do that? What does that mean? I thought about it for a long time, and for a long time I wrote them as a student, but I never knew what I was doing when I wrote them. I never figured them out. And then I spent a year teaching in North Carolina, a semester teaching in North Carolina last year, and I was living in this beautiful little mountain house by myself, and I wrote a prose poem one day, and it made sense as a prose poem. So a prose poem is simply a piece of writing that tries, that endeavors to express itself both as a poem and as a prose piece. And there's a whole variety of ways to go at that. And, you know, what you have to do if you're going to write them is sort of find your own way. I don't know how the tortoise got in through the fence and past the neighborhood dogs that run loose once the sun is down, but I found her near a nest of her eggs where the garden had already begun to turn to autumn. It seemed she'd found a home there, and who was I to tell her otherwise? So I brought her straw to make a better bed, and food I never saw her eat, but that disappeared from the tin plate where I put it. I don't remember now how long it took, but she kept the eggs warm until they hatched, and her many babies scrambled out in every direction until she rounded them up again into her care. Now, I have to tell you that there never was a tortoise, only one that I wanted to be there. There never was a fence to crawl under or neighborhood dogs for someone to step around down the dark alley. There was no dark alley. There was no nest or eggs, no straw, no hope for anything. But I did find a tortoise in my yard one morning, where it had laid its eggs in a nest it had made with mowed grass. I don't know where she came from, but perhaps she was a neighbor's pet and there was a zoo nearby. I called the police to see if they knew what to do, and they came quickly and confirmed that it was a tortoise with eggs. Sometimes you need to tell a story to fill a hole in your mind, or to try and mend something that's been torn by a violent wave that washed through you once. There was no tortoise, no policeman. I know. I have to stop doing this. I want you to believe me. It's all about the story. It's all we have. So that's a prose poem. Now, it's kind of hard to hear. If you were reading it, you would see that what I do is I take metrical lines, either accentual lines or iambic pentameter lines, and then I just ignore the breaks and I just write them as prose. So that's my oversimplistic regard for the form. I'm doing both at the same time. I'm writing prose, but I have a lyrical content, a lyrical movement. That's what I'm trying to do. So let me read a few more of these, and then you get a sense of them. This is called Earring. So I'm just trying to share some of this process that I went through with the writers present. So the second problem I had to solve was, I wonder what subjects are the most appropriate for this form. And then I got to thinking that if I could find these little moments, these little gems of experience, that I could build them around each one of those, as long as the effect was outside of myself, because I didn't want this to be Dear Diary. I wanted this to be something that people could relate to these experiences, obviously. So this is called earring. I didn't know then, or would not allow myself to know, that she was trying to find a way to say goodbye to me. I was stunned blind by my love for her and would do anything to make her happy. Outside in the cold December snow one night, we had a stupid argument about something stupid and let it go way past certain boundaries, I think, of hurt. I didn't know what the problem was. I tried to talk to her through her ranting, and then during all of that, she lost an earring in the deep snow when she slammed her head into one of the historic elms where she had run into the dark to get away from me or from her own longing. For a long time, I couldn't find her, not until she came back crying and begging me to help her find the earring. Her sister had given it to her many years before, she said, but I wasn't sure why someone would cry so hard over a lost earring. I was still a boy, though I'd seen the war and some hard things, so I promised her I'd find her earring. She's cold and shaking. I walk her back to her room and pull the blanket up to her chin and head out into the cold again. I'm on my hands and knees in the dark among huge elm trees. I can feel the rhythm of the night beat and pulse like a heart. I make a grid and then feel my way with gloveless hands through snow as if I was feeling the edge of a landmine trigger. The snow continues to fall on me and on the elms already heavy and on the whole landscape of our dreams, so that everything is white again, transformed into mute monuments of itself. My knees soak through and begin to freeze. My fingers I can no longer feel, but still, out of love, I stay out there looking for the tiny spray of gold in the tons of snow, as if finding it would somehow ensure her love for me. But then the wind blows hard for a fool. And in that chill, I got a good look at myself, on my hands and knees, searching for a tiny gold earring in the snow, and there is a joy inside of my tears when I find the earring, buried in the snow, among the elm trees you could hide behind an ambush. So that's the idea. Are you kind of getting the idea from just those two, what I'm trying to do here? I'll read you one more. I'll end with this one. Okay, this is Clinical Notes number 92. You're waiting for the spring to find its way through, so let me stop right there. So this is a prose poem, and that first line goes past that fifth beat, but do you hear that? You're waiting for the spring to find its way. So what happens if you do that, but you don't have the break at the end of the fifth beat? Instead, you just go on and turn it into prose. Well, the prose becomes very musical. You're waiting for the spring to find its way. The winter wants to stay with us a while. It clings with icy fingers to our hearts, the cold that you can feel so deep inside you think you'll never know the warm again. You're waiting for the angle of the sun to change enough to let you breathe a little easier. The sky, an invitation to a blue as endless as the suffering of souls, of souls that you may hear. Their hollow voices carried on the wind at night that speaks a tongue that only those who open their minds can understand. You understand? I'm saying this so I can stay alive, because I'm only safe inside the words. The song of words that flows through all my veins, the blood I need to stay with you a while. The only other choice I have, to let the strands of light that hold me here release me from the weight of seeing death I carry with me like a ruck. Release me from the burdens that only nights with the faint smell of sulfur understand. The problem is I don't know what I want. If I let go, there's nothing left of me except the boy I was before the sky fell down. I see him sometimes walking with a gun through brilliant sun and emerald green, the danger only feet away. I see him sometimes hiding in a hole as dark as blood while rockets sailed in like freight trains through his brain. You understand? This circle never ends. There's always this dark hit parade of favorite moments blasted out of time by fear that you can taste and feel right through your gut. It's time to go. I've said too much. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions. So if you'd like, raise your hand and I'll come over with the microphone.
Extra credit. You get extra credit for questions?
Thousands of points.
Yeah, thousands of extra credit points. Yeah. Please don't be shy. I'm a teacher. You can ask me a question. Yeah.
So, like, how hard is it for you, like, I mean, like, to get the hang of iambic pentameter? Because, like, how hard was it for you to get, like, the hang of iambic pentameter? Like, was it something that came, like, naturally to you, or would it take, like, a lot of practice? Because, like, I've tried it, and it's hard.
Yeah. A lot of practice. Yeah, I had teachers who made us do that, fortunately.
Okay.
So I learned from an early age that that was part of the writing experience, that prosody is a range of musical options. And just like if you're playing jazz piano, you know, the more options you learn, the better you get. So you could take something like a simple scale, a C minor scale, and do so much with just that, right? Well, it's the same idea. So you give yourself more resources as a writer. And, you know, we read poems in class today that were beautifully illustrative of the kind of poetry that can do both of those things at the same time. Can have that English line, that English music, but also be free. Be a free verse poem too. There's no rule that says no, you can't mix those two. Prosody is a range of musical options. So at one end is free verse, at the other end is the most metrical poem you can think of, and in between are all these other options that you can use. Does that answer your question? Yeah, it took me a long time, but you know, I'm not that smart, so it takes me a long time to get there. What else? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So how long does it take you to write a poem?
How long does it take me to write a poem? Depends on the poem.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere from, well, I've written a couple poems in a couple days, but only a few. Usually it takes about 3 or 4 months before I finish stuff.
Why does it take you so long?
I told you I'm not so smart. It takes me a long time. I don't know. It's just that's how long it takes. You have to get the words right. So the older you get, the more you insist on that. The younger you are, the more you let yourself get away with, because you're coming up, you're just learning. But when you get older as a writer, you say, no, I can't do that anymore. It has to be perfect. It has to be right. So you do it until it gets right. That's all. But if you're lucky, then you'll fall in love with that part of the writing life. That's what happened to me. So I never saw it as like torturous, or I loved that, spending 3 hours on a couple lines. I love that kind of time. Just trying to get the words right. Remember that phrase. Try to get the words right.
Yes, thank you for a wonderful experience.
You're welcome.
I'm Ralph Mama, and I have a question I may have asked you many, many years ago.
Yes.
Could you give us, the writers among us, do you have any advice for those of us who are contemplating the writing career?
I actually have an answer to that question. Because I asked the same question of Galway Cannell once. And he said 2 things. He said, it takes 20 years. And I remember thinking to myself, it's not going to take me 20 years, buddy. I don't know about you. The second thing he said is, it takes 20 years. Second thing he says, always make it hard. Always make it hard. So what happens is, as a writer, you reach certain plateaus. You accomplish a certain level of a poem. And it's very seductive to stay there, because you become very accomplished at it, and it's easier for you to do that. But what he said is, when you get to that point, start over. Make it harder again. Always make it hard. Say, okay, now I'm going to write sonnets. Now I'm going to write villanelles. Now I'm just going to do iambic pentameter, whatever. But always make it harder. So I followed that advice, and here I am. So that's the advice I would give everyone. It takes 20 years, because it really does take 20 years. But then if you think about it, it takes 20 years to accomplish anything, doesn't it? To be really accomplished at something. To be a plumber, You don't want the guy who's like 1 year. You want the 20-year guy. The mechanic, the doctor. Yeah. Can I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
A question,
Yes, sir.
face to face. I'm wondering if you can speak to us about how you marry the process of writing poetry that can be healing for yourself and others with the process of working a poem, of reshaping it, of cutting it down, of treating it a little bit more mechanically than you would the actual process that comes out of you when you write.
That's a great freaking question, I'm telling you. It really is. And it was a real important lesson for me that I share when I work with veterans. If you're going to write about those experiences, it has to become an artistic struggle. That's the struggle that has to take place. Not an emotional struggle, not an ethical struggle. That's past, that's too late. It has to be an artistic struggle now. So that's what allows you to do it, you see, because it's no longer about me or my psychology or my experiences. It's about solving the problem of this poem. Good question. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
In the workshop, you talked about how you didn't have a computer to rearrange lines.
When I was a student, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I was wondering if you could speak to your process, how it may have evolved as a writer as new technology is being introduced, and if there's stuff that you still do now, even though there is technology to make it easier.
Yeah, very truly. I believed for a long time that I was going to die before it all caught up with me. I really did. But technology moved too fast, and I didn't die, and it caught up with me, and I had to learn it. I still write by longhand. I think that when you type a poem, especially on a computer, it looks too finished too soon. You can make it look like it's in the New Yorker or something, depending on the font, right? So if it's in longhand, to be good, it has to really be good. So I still do that, but it changed in terms of, it's a funny thing that she's talking about. So now on a computer, when you're working on a poem, one of the great things you can do is switch lines around real quick, right? Cut and paste and move and all that stuff. So before, we didn't have computers. You couldn't do that on a typewriter. So what I used to do, and my friends and I used to do, is we take our poems and we take a ruler and cut each line with a razor blade. And then we have these long strips of lines so that we can move them around like that. And, sometimes it worked. So it changed that way. But I encourage my students to write longhand and not to write on a computer. I think it's a bad idea. I don't know. There's something about feeling it. That there's so much distance there. But, when you have the pencil in your hand. I don't know. Some people do wonderfully creating on the computer. I can't do that. I admire people who do that. Yes.
Just one last question before we
Yeah.
When do you decide to scrap a piece of writing rather than try and save it?
Yeah, good question. So usually what happens is I revise it into nothing. So if it can't hold up to the rigors of the revision, then it has to go. That's usually what happens. There's nothing left when I get done doing to what I have to do to it. It's hard though. For a long time I used to keep this journal of things that I cut out of other poems. And often I would go to that, take things out that I would use. So you can think about it that way. You don't have to ever throw it away. Put it somewhere else. Maybe somehow, some way it will be useful again. Thank you all very much for your questions.
Thank you all. If you have a book or you want to buy a book and have it signed, Dr. Weigel will be happy to do that for you.